Okay, so this is the Bible study for First John chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. And the text says, "Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, um, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, but every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us, but whoever is not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood." All right, so remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us as we study this text. Number 1 on our Bible study says, "What is John's instruction in 4:1? A, don't believe every spirit." He definitely says that. B, test the spirits to see whether they are from God. That is the sort of corollary to that. He says, don't believe every spirit, but test the spirits. And then C, there are people teaching wrong things in the name of God, and we should be careful who we believe. So that is a paraphrase, essentially, of the rest of the verse, which is, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. And I would say, that was true already in the time that John was writing this, but that's true today. Not everybody who says they speak from God is actually speaking from God. Not everybody who says they're a Christian is actually living as a Christian and speaking the Word of God. So all of that's pretty important for us to understand going in. But I would say probably even more of a problem, because as America became, largely a Christian nation. Now, I would argue it's becoming less that now, but historically, America has been a Christian nation, much like the Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire under Constantine, and as Christianity becomes sort of the affirmed thing, the popular thing, then there will be people affirming themselves as Christian because it's popular, but then also choosing the parts of Christianity that make them more popular and avoiding the things that people don't want to hear. And so we kind of have this sense that Christianity's popularity is also its downfall. Some people right now, as Christianity sort of is waning perhaps in its popularity in America, lament that and talk about how sad that is. And certainly we as Christians would love to be the preferred in society. But I would say that not being preferred means that the people that choose to be Christian choose it intentionally, and therefore choose all of it, even the unpopular pieces. Because if we're gonna go, we're gonna go all in, and therefore the truth is more likely to be proclaimed. Whereas the more popular Christianity has been, it has also been sterilized of some of its truth. So I would argue we're in for a better time in terms of the truth of the gospel. But that's not a popular way to think either. And I would just say that it has been a very dangerous time over the last 50 or 100, or we could even argue 250 years of America's existence, because Christianity occupied a center place. Everybody said they were Christian, and therefore everything was said from a Christian perspective. And if you believe that all of that actually was Christian, then you were in danger of believing things that were false and not from God, but were affirmed as being from God. So there are still today false prophets, all that is to say. Number two, how according to 4:2 do we recognize the Spirit of God? He says, every spirit that acknowledges Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. Um, so that's kind of, the main thing is that a spirit needs to affirm Jesus has come in the flesh. Now, I'm not going to get ahead of myself because number 3 is going to break this down, but I think it's really important that we don't think that that means that everybody that says, oh yeah, Jesus came in the flesh is necessarily speaking from God, because the fact that Jesus came in the flesh actually has some necessary. So if Jesus came in the flesh, then this is what that means. And there are people that casually affirm Jesus has come into in the flesh, but maybe disagree with or discount what is a necessary corollary to that, the necessary next step. That if he has come in the flesh, then that means, it has to mean this. And so I would argue that what John is saying here is not that every spirit that casually affirms Jesus has come in the flesh is a true spirit, but rather every spirit that recognizes Jesus coming in the flesh and the things that that necessarily means. The truth about that and surrounding that. So number 3 says, according to what we've been learning in the rest of 1 John, why is it so important to affirm Jesus Christ came in the flesh? A, because people were saying that Jesus was more of a phantom, and that is the only way we could have he could have really been good. So remember, we've been talking about this throughout the book of 1 John. The heresy of Docetism or Gnosticism that was affirming Jesus as a phantom, not having really come in the flesh. B, because if he came in the flesh, then flesh does not have to be evil. See, this is the important sort of next step in that thinking, because we affirm Jesus as good, we affirm Jesus as Savior, and we affirm him as having come in the flesh. We affirm him as holy and Son of God, and we affirm him as coming in the flesh. That means flesh does not have to be evil. It can be influenced by the Spirit living in it. So if the Spirit of God indwelt the flesh in the person of Jesus, and because of that the flesh became good, then that says something about what happens when the flesh or the Spirit indwells us. See, because if he came in the flesh, it brings hope for the rest of us who also have flesh. That's true. Number 4, what sort of spirit, according to 4:3, is not from God? Every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. That's the sort of spirit. The sort of spirit that denies Jesus as having come in the flesh, the spirit that denies Jesus as the Son of God. Jesus has to be all of these things in order for him to be truly meaningful in the way that I believe he wants to be meaningful in our life as we look to him. And so a spirit that denies any piece of that is not from God. Number 5, so according to 4:3, what sort of spirit would say that the flesh is only evil? Spirit is the only thing that can be holy. Jesus must not have been truly human, and we cannot live according to God's will because we are only human and flesh has to be evil. So all of these things line up. The sort of spirit that says flesh is only evil, then the spirit that like these are this, then this, then this, then this. So this is a logical train that I've heard preached in pulpits, to be honest. So this is a logical train that was declared a heresy and is being addressed by John and ultimately denies Jesus is coming in the flesh. And this is what it denies because of that. So even if it happens to say, oh yeah, Jesus came in the flesh, but it denies, it says we are only human and our human flesh has to be evil, then that is saying that we don't believe that Jesus really came in the flesh, because if we did, flesh wouldn't have to be evil. You see, so sometimes we believe something and we don't really understand even what we say we're believing. So when we casually say, I'm only human and this flesh has to be evil, we're saying that Jesus couldn't have come in the flesh, because if he had, the flesh, he would have been evil, because the flesh has to be evil. And so we got to be careful about saying the last thing, because we are denying Jesus came in the flesh, and that spirit is not from God. Did you follow that? So we don't realize that that's what we're saying when we say it. We don't think we're saying anything about Jesus. So we don't logically connect. We think can say Jesus came in the flesh, and I'm only human, my flesh has to be evil. But we don't realize that when we say this, we must either be saying Jesus was evil or Jesus didn't come in the flesh. That's what it requires. We have to say one of those two things in order to actually believe this. And so therefore, we don't realize that we're saying we're speaking from a spirit that is not from God, or we're listening to someone who is speaking from a spirit that is not from God. When we discount what God can do in the human flesh of a person. Number 6, according to verse 4:4, should we be afraid of the spirit of Antichrist that according to this text is already in the world? Yes, no, why, and why not? So in 4:4 he says, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one that is in the world. So the answer is no, we shouldn't be afraid, because the one who is in us, God, the Spirit of God, the very power of God, is in us, and he is greater than the one that is in the world. So when people run around afraid of the devil, afraid of the spirit of Antichrist, afraid of those who have false teachings, afraid of whatever, we are not recognizing that the Spirit of God, either the Spirit of God isn't in us and we should be afraid, or we're not recognizing the power of the Spirit of God within us, which, by the way, is the same problem as saying, well, I'm only human and this flesh has to be evil, because that is also denying the power of the Spirit of God within us. Either the Spirit of God isn't in us, or we're denying the power of the Spirit of God within us. And so I hear Christians all the time denying the power of God. And I have to believe that either they've not had the power of God within them and experienced it, or they just don't understand what he is able to do, so they're not giving him sway, not giving him authority to do what he wants to do within us. Number 7, does this text also give us encouragement for our life in this body? Yes, it does, because it tells us what God could do if we would let him, if we would recognize what he is able to do and stop denying what he is able to do. Then he can do immeasurably, abundantly more than we can ask or think, which is a different passage, but it's true. He can do more than we can ask or think within us. He can do things within us that we didn't think were possible. And so I think a lot of times we are thinking in terms of our experience and our weakness in this body, instead of allowing something we have not yet experienced, which is the power of God having his full way in us. When we consider that which we have not experienced, more can happen than what we think. And we just haven't considered that, perhaps. For me, I served God nominally for a long time, without recognizing what God could do in my life and really wanted to do in my life, and without allowing him to do that. And because of my experience that seemed like the weakness of God, I stopped serving God. But when I came back to God and I needed his help and he showed me his power in one situation, and I began seeking him and asking for him to work in other situations, he began to show me the extent of his power and what he could do in me, and it changed everything for me. And so I am a different person today because of what he did in me, which before that I stopped believing in him because I never saw him do that. But mainly I never saw him do that because I never allowed him to do that. I never had heard that he could do that. I never saw him doing that in others because I was, I was amongst people who called themselves Christians yet had not allowed God to do all that he wanted to do in their lives. Number 8. Why, according to 4:5, does the world tend to listen to the other viewpoint, that of the Antichrist? They are from the world, and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. In other words, because what they say makes sense. When I say I'm only human and I declare my weakness, that makes sense to everybody. You know why? Because people that have not experienced the power of God, that's their experience too. So it is a very persuasive argument. So people listen to the spirit of Antichrist. People listen to this viewpoint that denies the power of God because they have not seen the power of God either. So they're going to have to trust in a God that they haven't yet seen at work in order for him to really do the things that would actually cause them to never doubt him again, if they saw it happen. Number 9, who, according to verse 4:6, listens to those who are from God and proclaim the message of holiness in bodily form? We are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us, but whoever is not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood. So in other words, the tendency is somebody who has already seen the power of God is much more likely to listen to the next thing that God could do. And so I would say maybe sometimes God does not show us all that he could do at once, but putting our trust in him for one thing. For me, it wasn't about my holiness. It was about my weakness. And I cried out to him in my point of weakness, and I had no place else to turn, and I asked him to come through, and he came through. Now I'm different because I've seen a God who is real and came through. And so now I listen to the next thing that he says he could do. And when I had a church who began to present to me the power of God at work in human flesh, all of a sudden I realized God can do more in me than I've ever let him do. And I believe that because I saw what he did when I was in my weakness and I cried out to him. And so if he could do that, he could surely do this too. And so I began to trust in him, and I saw piece by piece as he has molded me and perfected me. And not that I'm perfect today in human form, but that he is continually making me more and more in his image and making me better. And I trust him each step, each point, because he's done it before. Number 10, is it possible that the Antichrist has been influencing us already more than we realize? Yes, no, what will we do? So I would say absolutely yes, because this teaching is the teaching of the Antichrist and has been something that we have bought into and is common teaching within the church, even in America. And so I would say absolutely, we've bought into this. It's influenced us more than we even knew. And now that we know, the real question is, what will we do about that? Will we begin to listen to what God can do and trust that instead of defaulting to this old way of thinking that made sense to us when we were in the world? Or are we just going to continue down that path and not give God a chance to do the things that he wants to do in us? I hope that's not what we do. I hope we give him the chance.